Hello everybody. We're going to continue our look into protostomes today by covering two more phyla, Arthropoda and Nematoda. These phyla, and a few other small phyla that we won't cover, are part of a subgroup called Ecdysozoa. Ecdysozoans are not only the most diverse group of protostomes, and really the most diverse group of animals, but also ecdysozoans have an outer covering which they shed periodically. So this is what defines ecdysozoans. They have a protective outer layer called the cuticle, and it's composed of organic material but is itself non-cellular. The outermost covering is composed of things like collagen or chitin and is not in fact composed of cells. That outer cuticle is secreted by the outermost layer of skin cells that are right underneath the cuticle. Because that outer layer is not composed of cells, it is not capable of growing once it's secreted. So juveniles of ecdysozoans are encased in cuticle and they can't grow unless they periodically shed that cuticle. So this process is called ecdysis, commonly referred to as molting, and ecdysis is where we get the term ecdysozoan. So this is an animal that molts. That's the etymology of it. Once they shed that cuticle, they have a small window of time in which they grow rapidly and then secrete a new layer of cuticle for protection. So there's a tiny little span of time in between each molting where they are vulnerable and squishy before they get that new layer of cuticle. So these are all protostomes, this entire group that's being shown here. We covered flatworms, we covered mollusks, and segmented worms. And these two phyla that we're covering today are also protostomes. But these two phyla specifically are also called ecdysozoans, this subgroup. They have cuticles that they periodically shed. We saw that many mollusks have a hard secreted shell, but not only is that made of a different substance, it's calcium carbonate instead of chitin, but it doesn't cover the entire body. Not every body surface is covered with a hard shell, and when mollusks do have shells, they're a one-time thing that's permanent. It's not something that's recreated over and over again and periodically shed or gotten rid of. So the first of our phyla is Nematoda. These are commonly referred to as roundworms. So we saw flatworms, we saw segmented worms, now these are roundworms. They range from very, very small, microscopic, all the way up to several inches long. There are 25 or so known or described species, and it's important to distinguish that this number is known or described species because there are many, many more than that. Nematodes are very common and very diverse, but their body plan doesn't really change too much from this very, very simple body plan. So they're really hard to distinguish and tell apart and identify without the aid of intense microscopy, different kinds of techniques, and genetics. So there's a lot more diversity out there than is really easy to detect at first glance. Their body form is very, very simple. It's just cylindrical, it's unsegmented, and it's highly adaptable. This very simple body plan allows for a wide range of life history strategies, ranging from predatory to parasitic, detritivores, and they live in lots of different kinds of environments. The cuticle in nematodes is not composed of chitin, but is composed mostly of collagens. Collagens are a kind of structural protein that are found in most animals. Collagens have really long amino acid chains, and they're wound together in a triple helix. Depending on how mineralized they are, how many other kinds of elements are incorporated into that structure, they can be really rigid or they can be really springy and flexible. So the walls of your blood vessels, collagen. The cornea of your eye, also collagen. The cartilage between your bones and the tendons attached to your muscles are also collagen. If you go ahead and pinch the skin on the back of your hand, you'll notice that as soon as you let go, the skin springs back into place, and that's because of the collagen in your skin. If you pinch the skin on the back of your hand 20 years from now, the skin will take much longer to drop back down because your collagen breaks down over time. About 90% of the known diversity of nematodes are free-living species, and they live within the top 15 centimeters of soil. These soil-dwelling nematodes feed on a variety of organisms. A lot of bacteria and other microorganisms compose a big part of their diet. They are fundamental in recycling nutrients because they decompose dead tissue. They help aerate the soil. And because a lot of them eat bacteria, they help regulate soil bacterial populations that otherwise would be able to replicate exponentially, sort of unchecked. And you can see this is an electron microscope image of a very small nematode, and this is a bacterial cell that's next to it. So this is a multicellular organism right here, and this is a single-celled organism right here, just for the size comparison, which is really striking. There is a particular nematode called Caenorhabditis elegans, shortened to C. elegans, and it's one of these free-living nematodes that has been exceptional as a model organism for all fields of biological research. It's a really simple organism, and it's easy to maintain colonies of. So C. elegans was the first animal to have its entire genome sequenced in 1998, and an immense amount of research has been done on them and uncovered mysteries about cell and organelle function, aging, nerve function, genetics, tissue growth and regeneration, and developmental biology. So it's had a profound impact on our knowledge of biology, and a lot of what we covered about meiosis we know because of work on C. elegans. On the other side of the coin, there is about 10% of the diversity of nematodes which are parasitic. A lot of the parasitic roundworms are parasites on plants, and the ones that are parasites of plants, some are specialist and some are generalist. So specialist parasites only have one species of host, one species of plant or animal that they will infect or live on or inside of. And generalists are one that have a parasitic lifestyle, but it doesn't really matter what kind of plant they're on. Their behaviors allow them to benefit off of whichever kind of plant they're on. So when they are pathogens of plants, or when they're parasites of plants, a lot of times they're living down in the roots and they form these sorts of root nodules. So this is the root of a rose plant that's been infected with nematodes that are living in these little growths on the roots. And nematodes are really prominent parasites in animals as well. Nematodes are parasites of pretty much every animal that exists. So this is the larva of an insect, and all of these tiny little white threads, these tiny little white filaments, are roundworms. These are a whole bunch of nematode parasites that were living inside of this larva that have become completely infected with them. There's an estimate that half of all species of animal on the planet have a nematode parasite that is exclusive to that species. So 1 in every 2 kinds of animal on the planet has its very own nematode species. If you have a dog or a cat or other kinds of pets, you may have had to pick up heartworm medicine. Those heartworms are a kind of nematode. And nematodes can infect humans as well. There are certain kinds that cause different diseases in humans. So pinworms are a common ailment in small children. They cause diaper rash and intense itching as they emerge from the anus to lay their eggs. Trichinosis is a nematode that lives directly in muscle tissue and it gets passed to humans through undercooked meats. It used to be a really big problem in commercial pork in the 1950s when we were first finding it and diagnosing it. And at that point, there were about 400 cases of trichinosis per year and about 15 deaths per year caused by this nematode. Nowadays, there are only about 7 cases of trichinosis per year, and those are largely from hunted game meat rather than commercial meat. Guinea worms are a kind of nematode that are contracted by drinking unclean water and swallowing nematode eggs. So this is something that happens in a lot of countries where they don't have consistent access to water purification. And what will happen is when the eggs are consumed, the nematodes will hatch and then develop inside of human tissues and work their way down the body in between muscles and connective tissues. And there they can cause a lot of problems. This is a picture of a nematode that causes trichinosis that's embedded in muscle tissue. And then this is an example of a nematode that's several inches long, a kind of guinea worm that's being extracted from somebody's foot. And they break really easily, so you have to extract them very slowly over the course of several hours so that it doesn't break. When nematodes like this are present in human tissues, sometimes they can clog up the lymphatic system, which is a lot of the interstitial fluid in between your cells that is moving different kinds of molecules around. So filarial worms are ones that will block up your lymphatic system, and then those kinds of fluids, lymph and interstitial fluid, will build up in your tissues, causing swelling. So this is a condition called filariasis that is caused by filarial worms. So all of this extra volume on this individual's foot, it's not packed full of worms, but the nematodes that are in there are clogging up certain ducts of the lymphatic system, which results in this kind of swelling. And sometimes other kinds of worms whose eggs are transmitted by biting flies or other kinds of insects will find their way into other human tissues as well. So river blindness is a kind of disease where nematodes are finding their way into people's eyes. And if you go and you visit a place where this is prominent for a week or a month, maybe you'll get 1 or 2 worms, but it's not really so much a problem. People that live in those areas, though, that are constantly exposed to it, will build up enough worms in their eyes that eventually they will go blind, which is what this term refers to. Like in flatworms and some kinds of protists, nematode parasites can have really complex life cycles where different life stages, they are present in different kinds of animals. They jump from species to species through different parts of their life. One really interesting example of that is this example where the hosts are referred to as berry ants. So this is a kind of cephalotes. It's a turtle ant. And when they get infected with nematodes, the nematodes will fill up the abdomen, fill up the back part of this ant, and they'll slowly leach away the cuticle, the exoskeleton, so it gets thinner and thinner, which makes it have a red appearance instead of a black appearance. It also induces a behavior in the ant for them to waggle their abdomens around and make it really conspicuous for birds that think that they are berries. You can see the similarity between the berries of the plant that they're present on and the abdomen of this ant, which would normally be black if it wasn't full of nematodes. The berries will then be eaten by birds, and then sometimes the ants will accidentally be eaten by birds, and the nematode will continue its life cycle in the body of the bird. The bird defecates out nematode eggs, which are then consumed by the ants, and it cycles like that.